Hey y'all, good morning and good day everyone wherever you're watching from. I'm so excited to be with you today on Grief to Grace. How are you doing? How are you doing? We always ask this question. How are you doing? I hope you're fine. I hope you're good. I hope things are working in line with how you want it and according to God's plan and purpose for your life. So I just want to say thank you for joining us once again on Grief to Grace podcast. And I am super excited to be with you today. Today, we have a guest in the house. But before we do that, we are going to raise a word of prayer and we will be right back. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together and share in the journey of healing and hope. Lord, we ask for your presence in this conversation and may it bring comfort, understanding, peace to all who are grieving. Guide our ways, inspire our hearts, and help us in the light of those who feel lost in darkness. Bless our guest, Danielle, and every listener tuning in today in Jesus' name. Amen. So, you are welcome once again to Grief to Grace, from Stuck to Unstuck. That podcast where we help you to move from being in pain to achieving your purpose. So, I am your host, Ruth Hephzibah, and I'm a grief and fresh start advocate. Our mission here is very simple. Here at Grief to Grace, we transform your pain into purpose and we equip you with the tools to embrace healing and renewal. Whether you're facing the death of grief or yearning for a fresh start, this is the space where faith meets healing. So, today, our episode is truly special. And we have an inspiring guest in the house, which is Danielle, and I think it's Sternquist. I'm not sure if I pronounced that properly, but I know she will introduce herself and pronounce it properly. So, who she is here to share her incredible journey of loss, resilience, and rediscovering of faith. Sometimes in our journey we just lose faith and we don't know how to go back, and we lose our way. We lost our way, and in most cases, God brings us back, and that is her story. So I don't know if you're already out of your way, because you've experienced grief in any form, or you are thinking of losing your way, getting out of God's way for whatever reason because of what you're experiencing. But I have good news for you. I have this guest in the house, Danielle, who will share her story of how she lost her way and God brought her back and she found it back. She lost her way because she lost her husband and her son and struggled all through. So the struggle she faced along the way is both heartbreaking and deeply inspiring. So I'm honored to share here with her today as she will be sharing her heart with us today on Grief to Grace. But before we begin, I want to take a moment to introduce my book. Our book, A Pen That Rewrites Grief, is that book that you need in this journey. This is that book you need in this journey. You can scan the QR code and get it. It is a 60-day guide. It is a 60-day healing and devotional guide that will help you in this journey. It has a lot of tools and interventions that you need. So every day is different. So also is every day in this book. And I tell you, if you go through and follow through with this book, you will definitely come back and say yes with your testimony, telling people how far the grace of God has brought you. So thank you so much. So without to going too much on that, I want to also talk about our project, which is help the grieving family. You can see it up there on our left hand corner of the screen. You can scan the QR code right there and help one person, one family. You can adopt a grieving family. So you can definitely adopt a grieving family in this season. So Adopt a Grieving Family project is that project where your contributions will help us to be able to provide groceries, gift cards to families who are navigating loss and grieving in this season. So if you would like to know how you will give, you can scan the QR code or you go to our website, grief2graceinternational.org, and you will definitely find it there. So, before I bring up my guest, I want you to stay tuned and listen. Stay tuned to the end and enjoy every bit of it. I have a gift for someone who stays tuned all the time to the end. And when you stay tuned to the end and you share your thoughts with us in the comment, or on all of our social media platforms, then you stand a chance to win a t-shirt from Grief to Grace International. So, right now, before I bring up my guest, I want you to just listen to this as I set her up. Okay, you are welcome back to Grief to Grace podcast. You are welcome back to Grief to Grace podcast. I don't know where you're watching from this moment, but I tell you, we are here again to talk to you about all that we have right here on Grief to Grace. So, can you please put it right there to let us know where you're watching from, where you're seeing us from right now? Can you let us know how you feel? Because that is what is important right now. How do you feel? How are you this morning? I am happy. I am super happy because I love this season. I don't know about you, Danielle. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. It's a little cold outside, but that's okay. It's nice and warm inside.
Yes, that's it. So thank you so much for joining us today. I have Danielle in the house today, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name so well.
Danielle Sternquist.
Okay, Danielle Sternquist in the house today, and she is here to share her story. So, just a brief one. Today's guest is Dennis Stensquick, as she said. I hope I got it right. So, and she knows the depth of grief like few others do. And her journey began at the age of 24 when her husband and a babysitter were critically killed in a train accident and left to care for her two young sons alone, and she faced unimaginable pain. Later, she endured another devastating loss when her son, Jordan, a Marine and epilepsy warrior, passed away. So, and that she was angry. Her story is really characterized with that of anger, faith, redemption, and the grace, incredible grace of God that brought her back to healing. So today we have Danielle in the house, and she is welcome to Grief to Grace. How are you? So
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
yeah, so thank you so much, Daniel, for all that you do. Thank you for joining us today. And I love your story. Like I always say, every grief story is usually different. And this one is truly different. I like that, especially the part of the epilepsy story where, because a lot of people, I didn't know about that syndrome that kills. I just saw it and I'm like, whoa, I never knew. I thought it was just a normal thing, like regular, just
Most
having.
people,
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of people don't know about it unless it happens to them, and that's how you
Yeah.
you learn about it.
That's it. So thank you so much for joining us today. So could you please take us back to your journey of with grief and share how your faith has played a role in this healing? So if you can talk to our audience about all of your story, how much you can, and they will super be excited. And I know it's definitely going to heal somebody. Thank you so much. So the next voice you'll be hearing will be that of Danielle.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I'd like to start just a little ways back when my husband and I got married. We were very young. We got married right out of high school. I was 18, he was 19. But back in the early 80s, that wasn't that unusual. It sounds crazy now, but it wasn't that unusual then. And we were married and we had a baby pretty much right away. I became a mother at 19, which I look at now and I think, you're crazy, girl. I can't imagine my kids coming and saying they're having a baby at 19. But anyway, so yeah, we were married and we were doing our thing. He was working. I was a stay-at-home mom, and we had to pinch pennies, of course. But it worked out. We loved our life, and we were going to a little church about 20 miles from us, the Annandale Free Church in Minnesota. And we loved the church and we loved the pastor. And we were doing really well. My husband actually came to Jesus while we were going to the church. We met a couple, and they had a daughter, and it was perfect because we were able to get her to babysit when we needed a babysitter, and it was somebody we trusted from church. And he actually brought my husband to God, actually out fishing, and which I think is kind of appropriate. And so he accepted Christ, and we kept going, and we had another little boy, and we decided to have him dedicated. Our church dedicates instead of baptizes. And I can explain that if you ever want to know about it. But we had him dedicated in church, and it was really, really nice. And we just felt like our family was coming together. And excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. Anyways, yeah, so then one day my sister was getting married and she asked me to be her matron of honor. And I was really excited about it because I'd never been in a wedding before. And my daughter Bonnie, who was 5 at the time, she was going to be a flower girl. So we decided to go shopping for dresses. And this happened to be on Good Friday in March of 1989. And so we went to the closest town that had formal wear, and did some shopping and had a really fun day. And my daughter was super excited to get to be a flower girl. So you can imagine what it was like for her trying on frilly dresses. So on our way home, we didn't have the radio on or anything, and we were just talking about plans for the wedding and things like what she was going to have. And we pulled into our driveway, and there was just a ton of cars in the driveway. And I thought, well, that's weird because my brother-in-law was supposed to be there, and then we were supposed to have a babysitter that I was supposed to bring home when I got home. And I walked in, and there was all these people in the house, and it was my mom and my in-laws and brothers, brother-in-laws, my brother and sister. My brother was there. My sister was with me at the time. And so I just walked in and I had no clue anything bad had happened. And I made the comment, sure, I go to town and you guys all come and have a party. And their faces just dropped because they knew they had to tell me what happened. And my mom told me that my husband had been killed on the railroad tracks and his truck was hit by a train. And I just collapsed right in the doorway. I was only 24 years old. I had two little ones, 18-month-old and a 5-year-old. And I had never lived on my own before. I'd always lived with either my mom or my husband. And so I was just in a panic of what I was going to do. And I went into the restroom and I shut the door and I just cried and I just felt sick. I just didn't know what I was going to do. And the loss, you just can't even imagine what it feels like to lose somebody in an instant, especially somebody who's young. He was only 26 years old. So I finally gather myself together and I come back out, and then they had to proceed to tell me that my friend's daughter that we got for a babysitter was also killed. And that was almost worse because it was somebody's child. And I just, of course, I didn't know what it was like to lose a child, but I felt worse for them actually than I felt for myself because, I just couldn't imagine what they were going through. And they were very, very strong Christians, and they did well getting through everything and, getting through the funerals and all that and moving on. But I wasn't so lucky. I've always had trouble with anxiety and depression. I had a really kind of a chaotic younger life. And so I kind of went off the deep end. That's what I always say. I didn't want anything to do with God. I was right away dating, going out, going to parties, things I should not have been doing. But at the time, I didn't know how to deal with it. And I guess that was my way of dealing with it. And I did that for about 6 months. And all of a sudden, I just had this feeling like, I think it was God telling me, you can't do this anymore. You have little kids to take care of, and this isn't right. And so I decided I wasn't going to date, and I bought a house, and we moved in here, and it actually happens to be the house right next door to where we used to live. I didn't really want to move my kids, but the house we lived in was really old and it had a lot of upkeep, and I couldn't do that by myself. So we moved to this other house, and it was in the same school district, so Bonnie could start school in the fall. And we were doing really well. And I ended up going to protest my taxes because I knew what I had paid for my house. So I went and protested my taxes, and they sent out a gentleman to come and reassess my property to see if they needed to lower it or raise it or whatever. Well, it ended up that a couple nights later, he called me and asked me to dinner. And I honestly was not planning on doing any dating at all. And but I just thought, well, what the heck? I'll go to dinner, it's just dinner. And we ended up, being really good friends and dating, and we ended up getting married. Well, it was a couple years later. It wasn't like instantly, but we ended up getting married and went back to church. And, after losing my faith, I had a really hard time. I couldn't go back to the church that I had the funeral at for Wes. It was just very, very difficult. I had PTSD. Every time I went in there, I would see his casket. It was just like the whole scene was right there for me when I go back to the church. So we decided to try a different church. So we joined a church that's just local from here, maybe 5 miles. And we really liked it. We liked the pastor. And my son, um, he was growing up, and my daughter was growing up, and we just were doing the whole thing, going to church and bringing the kids. Um, and then my son went to into the military when he turned 18, which he was really excited about. And we have a lot of military in our family, and that's part of the reason my childhood was so chaotic. Is I went to 12 different schools growing up. And so he went into the military and was doing really well. He loved his job. He was a combat cameraman. So he did video shoots. He ended up being stationed at Quantico, and he did video shoots at Quantico. And he actually had sent a part of his video to Hollywood that was in Iron Man 2. And so that was pretty exciting that he could say he had he had a video in Iron Man 2. And he got to meet Kevin Bacon. So that was really fun for him, and fun to send pictures home for us to be able to see. And he was doing really well. And one day he called me on the telephone, and he said that he had been waking up in the morning with blood on his pillow. And I was just like, that's weird. He said, do you know what could be wrong? And the only thing I could think of was maybe he was grinding his teeth and he bit his cheek or something like that, because when he was young, he did grind his teeth. So that was my only thought of what could be wrong. And a couple months later, we get another call, and he finally told me he'd had a full blown seizure. Um, in a vehicle, just as he was falling asleep, he went into a grand mal, it's actually called now a tonic clonic seizure. And they had to pull him out of the vehicle and lay him down on the cement and call an ambulance. And so he ended up, there's not really a lot they can do once they have the seizure and they come out of it. So they sent him home or back to the base with, instructions of seeing a neurologist. And so he ended up going to see a neurologist, and they ended up diagnosing him with what's called left temporal lobe epilepsy. So that would be in the left side of your head. He had EEGs, which is the test where they put all the wires on your head and they test the brain waves. He had that done, and it showed nothing. And then he had an MRI, and he had scar tissue in his left temporal lobe, and they said that was from seizures, and that was what was causing the seizures. He had had a couple of what they call febrile seizures as a baby. When he was 7 months old, he had his first one, and it lasted 45 minutes. And we had to rush him to the hospital, and he spent a week. And then he had another one at age 2 that lasted 20 minutes. Now, these seizures are generally only last 1, maybe 2 minutes on, a normal person would only have 1 or 2 minute seizure. And his febrile seizures were 45 minutes and 20 minutes. And his seizures he was having at when he grew up, when he was 22 and he was at Quantico, they were 5 to 7 minutes, which is long for a seizure. So anyway, so he got put on medicine, and the anti-epileptic medicine was helping. He was not having such frequent seizures, although he was still having them once in a while. So of course he had to be medically retired or medically discharged from the military. And I had told him to see about medical retirement, because then he could carry his insurance from the military. And of course, somebody with a brain problem like that's going to have insurance. So he ended up getting medically retired, but it took him actually like almost 2 years to get it. But so he didn't have to, what they call PT, physical fitness stuff. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to go to a shooting range. He just did his regular job, and he did a lot of retirements for generals, things like that. But he ended up getting to go and do a video on the embassy guards. So he went to like 6 different countries. Um, to do these videos for the embassy and embassy guards for promoting them to get people to join to do that job. So that's what he did. And then he came home, and we were really happy he was home because I was always really, really worried about him when he was out there. Because, of course, as a mom, the first thing you want to do when you hear something like that is get on a plane and go out there. And he's like, Mom, I'm a Marine. You can't come out and take care of me. So, and my daughter and him finally convinced me it would be okay. So I just said, okay. And we'd say prayers at church for him, and we would always, have him on the prayer list. And then after he came home, he was home. He started college right away in January, and he was gonna, go and do the same thing he was doing at Quantico, but he wanted to get what do you call it? A degree. I'm sorry. I have long COVID, so sometimes memory is bad. So, anyways, he ended up going into school right away, and that fall we had seen him for Thanksgiving. Actually, we had a big family Thanksgiving, and my uncle does photography, and he came out and he did family pictures for everybody, and it was so great because we really didn't have family pictures. So Jordan was able to be in our family pictures with us, and it was so cool. Um, and so that was Thursday, and then Monday, I had my kids were in 4-H, and so my niece and my son Devin was in 4-H. Devin came along. He was about 10 at the time, so he had been born when Jordan was like 15. And my daughter, I was 6 months pregnant when she was graduating high school. So they were in 4-H anyways. And we got a knock on the door. We were having a meeting for 4-H at our house because we switched houses, all the time and for the monthly meeting. And so they were at our house, and we had all these kids there, and we had a knock on the door, and it was the sheriff, our county sheriff. And he asked if he could talk with us. And I didn't really think much of it because we've had sheriffs come to our house before because we live right on a highway. And they might be looking for somebody or, ask if we've seen anything. So, anyway, we went downstairs and he told us, me and my husband, that our son had died. And sorry, this is the hard part. He died. He was home working on his schoolwork on his computer, and he went into a seizure. And he'd had a seizure in the beginning of October. And we took him to the doctor and at the VA clinic, and the doctor didn't show up. And we had to reschedule. And then when we went in, they said that he had to be seen by a neurologist down in Minneapolis. So we went ahead and they just send you out an appointment. You don't get to pick a day, they just send it out. So their appointment date is in 70 days. That's an incredibly long time to wait for an appointment. And so there was nothing you can do about it. We're just so busy. And so when he passed away, he was still waiting for that appointment. And when I got told that he passed away, all I could think of is Why is God doing this to me again?
Yeah,
You know,
that's
I've already been through this once with a husband. Why is he doing this now with the son? And it was just super, super hard. But I didn't want to take any medication like I did with my husband for to calm me down through the funeral and all that because I didn't want to forget. I didn't want to forget the funeral. I didn't want to forget anything that I did or, you know, that happened with Jordan. So I didn't take any medication. And I made it through the funeral. And we had a military funeral. I apologize for the tears. It just comes
no,
sometimes.
it's okay. It's okay.
um, we had a military funeral, which was so, you just can't even believe how irreverent it is when you have a military funeral. And he had like six of his friends that were Marines that came to his funeral from all over the United States. And these friends, they did a special thing when they came into the funeral. They waited and came in last. And when they came in and like almost like marching. And they took their pins off their caps and they put their pins in with my son. And it was so special. And I'm still friends with all those people. In fact, one of them just sent me a bracelet with Jordan's information from his Marine information on it. And I mean, this is 12 years and they're still supporting me. I have one man. I call him a kid because to me they're still kids. But one man, he was best friends with Jordan, and he's for years sent me Mother's Day cards and really, really supportive. Um, it's just so great to have supportive people. But once again, I was just so angry with God. And it took me till about a year and a half ago to come back to God because, and I don't know what happened. One day I was sitting there and it was just like, I need God, I need Him. And I started, and I said, it's very hard. It's hard when you've been away from God to come back because you have all these guilt feelings and you think, you know, you've done wrong things, you've been sinning, and it's very difficult to get through that and come back. But I had decided that I am just going to start with doing morning devotions every morning because I'm on disability. I don't work for because of my health. Every morning I do about 2 hours worth of devotions and read the Bible. And a lot of what I do are podcasts like yours because I have a hard time reading now because of long COVID. I have a hard time focusing on the words. So I have the Bible app. So I'm able to listen to the Bible instead of reading. Sometimes I read, but if it's a day where I'm having struggling, you know, I'll just listen to it or I'll listen to it before I go to bed to help me, you know, relax. And anyway, so then I had called a pastor at our old church, and I was gonna have trouble with that again too, because of course my son had his funeral there. But I decided that I just need to get over it. And, I have the support of my husband and the support of the people at church. And they've been all really great. And I called my pastor one day, and this was about a year after I started getting back with God and asking for forgiveness and rededicating my life to Jesus Christ. And I called my pastor and I said, Pastor, I've never been baptized. because we do the dedication as babies, but then it's up to you to get baptized. It has to be your decision. And so, and I'd never been baptized. So I called him up and he said, "Oh, I'd love that." So we made a plan and we actually went out to a lake with all the people from church. And I was the only one that wanted to be baptized. So they all came out and I was baptized September 15th. And I felt part of me felt like it was new. Like my life was new. I'm starting over. And I needed that. I needed that fresh start and I needed to not feel like I'm not worth God's love.
Wow.
And I feel so much better now. But one thing that I did do that I would totally suggest for anybody that's going through severe grief is I went to a Christian counselor. And we had a lot to talk about because I went through some sexual abuse as a little girl of 6. And I questioned, where was God? I was this little girl who was innocent, loved Jesus, sang Sunday school songs, went every Sunday with my grandma to church. And she said he was there. And she said, think about think about what was happening to you and then think about where was God. And I could picture it. I could picture him with his hand on my shoulder. Um and he was there and he but so is Satan on the other side because Satan is all around us, but so is God. And you just have to be able to ask God for help and ask God for forgiveness and and whatever you need, just ask Him because He's there no matter what. Even if you feel like He's not, and you're probably going to feel that way, He is there. And I guess I feel like I'm proof because now I'm 12 years down the road from my son's death, and I have 2 beautiful grandchildren. And I've had a lot of problems. I've had a lot of health issues because of COVID, and I mean, I'm sure a million people have. But then I have heart failure from prior, but I think, and I said it sounds really crazy, but it's actually given me time to devote to God. Because if I didn't have these health issues, I would be working 8 hours a day and not having as much time as I do now to be able to do things like this and help other people, which is what I want to do. And yeah, so I'm super, excited that Ruth, that you invited me here. And I would like to do a little shout out about my book. My book is Why I Am Me and Surviving Grief and Trauma. And the reason I named it that is because I feel like everything that happens to you in life makes you turn out a certain way. So why I am me is all the things that happened that made me me.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing today.
You're welcome.
I'm really like your story is deeply moving. I'm moved by all that you've been talking about, and because I can not really, I don't know how to put it, but the mother's love, especially losing your husband, losing your son, is
Right.
unbelievably touching. I
Thank
lost
you.
my husband, and I know how much I've still not been able to recover from most of all of it.
It is
And when you're not added to the loss of a child, it's something that I am just trying to factor on how you actually felt. And I know there are a lot of people out there that are going through the same situation and they don't even know how to. I remember I was sharing in one of the podcasts sometime how The devil can be very tricky, the devil came in and told me, I was reading my Bible, and he told me, are you still reading this Bible? It
Mhm.
challenged my faith. And I remember for the first time in my life, I lost hope. And I dropped that Bible. I took all of my husband's altar materials, his Bible, his books, all of his Christian books. And I'm like, this is the book we read all the while and nothing happened. And I
Right.
trashed them. So, but thank God for the grace of God that brings us back all the time. And I'm super excited that God brought you back, even in all of this season. Because most times, grief make people do a lot of stuff. Takes you far away from God. It takes you just so much away. And if you're not careful, you'll be far gone and you're gone with it. So thank you so much for sharing, because I know a number of persons, and because of my job, that grieve and they go into like prostitution, like you said, drinking, all sorts, and doing drugs, and
Mhm.
just living and just like an opposite lifestyle of what they originally want to be.
Right.
Yeah, and they make those wrong decisions, and at the end of the day, it still haunts them. So, but I'm grateful for all you're doing, and I like your book. I was going through it on Instagram, on Amazon, and I think that's a very wonderful book that people need to read.
I actually just fixed it because I had the pages literally. So I
Yeah,
ended up fixing it like 2 days ago and putting it back out there. It's hard when you do it yourself and all the formatting and everything. And
yes,
so yeah, so I learned a lot doing the book. It was very much a learning experience.
thank
I
you,
love the name of your podcast, Grief to
thank
Grace. I
you.
think that is just, it says it all. It's
He
just,
says it all.
says it all.
That was what God used to heal me. He said, I'm moving you from grief to grace. And I'm happy because He's actually been able to move me from grief to grace. These days I barely remember grief. I see the grace in it. I see the purpose in what God has done. I see the reason why things happened the way they did. But before now, I never saw it that way. And
Yeah.
I know someone is listening today, and you will also know one day when you give out your time for a fresh start, like Danielle did, you will be able to look back and say, whoa, it's actually grace to grace.
And please get a hold of me if anybody is interested in having me speak at their church or,
Okay.
any group, a ladies group or whatever. If you're looking for somebody to speak, I would love to be able to do that as well.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you can reach Danielle on your Gmail, right?
Yes, Danielle Sternquist at gmail.com.
Okay. And she's also on social media. So on Facebook, are you on Instagram? I saw only
I am
Facebook.
on Instagram. DS My Books is my Instagram feed.
Okay. So thank you so much for
Thank
joining us
you.
today. I'm so super excited to have you in the house. So what a turning point for us today. So today, I want to ask you this question. What is your turning point in your journey of healing? If you can share with us in the comments or send us an email on Grief to Grace now, as most of you usually do, at gmail.com, we will be super excited to respond to that. And also, if you need any sort of help because, starting afresh, I'm always there to help you. I'm your Fresh Start advocate, and I believe that Fresh Start is possible. And it is better in most cases because now God is going to be leading the way, not you. So you can reach me on my DM, or you can check us out on our website, grief2graceinternational.org. So we're doing a lot of stuff at grief2graceinternational.org. We doing so much. Our coaching, books, worship sections. You can listen to. our songs on Spotify, Apple, on all of the platforms, and you'll be so glad you did. And also, I have a book coming up in 2 days. In 2 days, so you can watch out. Next week, I'll be talking to you about the book. Also, our sister organization, Echoes of Life, is for cancer patients and survivors as well as caregivers, so and their families. So if you need any sort of resources or you stuck in your journey, you don't know what to do as a cancer patient or a caregiver, reach out to us at echoesoflife.org and you will be glad. Someone will definitely respond to you and give you guidance on how to move. So, our giveaway today is, as we wrap up today's story of Daniel's, we one of our giveaway is that healing is a journey, not a destination. You know, I talk about this almost every time because I keep reiterating it because people feel that healing is, when you start your healing process, it ends there. It's like an immediate thing. No, it's something you need to build upon and keep building upon. So it's a journey, please. So start your journey today and you will be so happy that you took that step today. Faith, it can be restored even in the depth of pain. And also, honoring your loved ones can bring can bring restoration. It can bring purpose to your grief. So those are my three takeaways from what she and Daniel talked about today, because faith, she was able to restore her faith irrespective of all that she went through. And she's been honoring her loved one. You can see the passion, you can see everything in her, how much she still loves her loved one. That someone is gone doesn't mean the person is forgotten, and that you decided to move on to remarry or to do whatever you want to do and do live your life doesn't mean that you have forgotten that person. It means that you have decided to honor that person in your life. So our Bible verse for today, as we always say here, is blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So I don't know what you're mourning today, but just know that comfort is here and Jesus is the way. So, on a final note today, before I give it up to Daniel to talk to you, give you a final word, I just want you to know that grief is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of love that endures. So, if you didn't take anything home today, please take this home. So, Daniel, do you have any word for us today?
Exactly what you said. I was told one time that when you grieve, the harder you grieve, the more you loved.
Yeah,
And it just, and if, like you say, if you get remarried, it does not mean you didn't love that person. They would not want you to be lonely.
that's
They
it.
would want you to move on.
That's it. So, thank you, Daniel. And now I have a question for you all. How do you honor your loved one's memory? So you can share with us on our social media pages and our platforms, and you will receive a free workbook from me. So don't forget to get our book, A Pen That Rewrites Grief. You can scan it as you go. Don't forget to get your copy of this book. You will be so glad that you did. Also, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media platforms. And don't forget to like and share our podcast. Talk to somebody about it. Let them know that a fresh start is possible, that grief is not bad after all. We have a lot of lessons to learn from that. So thank you for joining us today. I am Ruth Hephzibah, and until next time, remain blessed and may you find grace in your grief and strength in your purpose. Have a very beautiful day.